Hello people, and welcome back to episode 30 of the Noobs Guide to City Skylines. Hope you're having a wonderful day. And thank you so much indeed for all the support last time when we put together this diverging diamond interchange and tried to focus on creating something of a sense of scale and distance in the game, which can be quite hard to achieve when you're within the 9-tile vanilla boundaries. But, you know, with a little bit of thick forest carefully placed against major infrastructure, it really kind of helps create a sense of scale, I guess, which is what I've already said. But yeah, it's really cool, so thanks for all supporting it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. However, today's episode, we are heading onto this little hill that sits to the south of the diamond interchange, and we're going to be working on a power plant. So this episode will really be a lesson and a focus of how we can take our service assets such as power plants. You can also do this with garbage processing or water treatment as well, to make a dedicated service area like a power plant or a water treatment plant, or a big sort of garbage processing area, right? You kind of get the general idea with this thought process. We're going to be using it, all vanilla assets, all unmodded, of course, as we always do in the Noobs Guide. And we're going to have to call upon the powers of orientation, everything that we've learned so far within this series, in order to get it to look how we like. It should sit really nicely up on top of this hill. We're also going to be sort of integrating some of the industry DLC assets into this build today as well. So there's a couple of fun, different ideas. Let's have a talk about how we can build a vanilla power plant in City Skylines, shall we? So first of all, let's start by analysing the terrain, and I think I'm actually going to grab the highest point of this little landmass that we chiseled out during last episode, actually, when we were working on all our layers. Okay, so just want this to be the focal point now. I'm going to keep the pine forest in because we'll have a very temporary spice sample of what's going to happen today. Let's go into our power. We're of course going to go for nuclear power, and what I'm imagining is that, you know, from wherever we sit in the map, you're going to see these cooling towers and a lot of the sort of power plant infrastructure. That again adds to our sense of scale from the interchange, doesn't it? I think it's quite nice, it's quite fun. So important that we maintain that layer of height within the build today. So of course, a little bit of terraforming and terrain work at the start of the build is always welcome. So in terms of positionings, I'm fairly happy with this now, okay? We'll of course do lots more rock detailing and forest detailing come the end of the episode, but for right now, it gives us something of a base frame. So we do have a rail line here, which I'm not averse to having a rail crossing here because there's not going to be vast amounts of traffic coming from this area, even though there is going to be sort of industry assets here, but we will sort of make do with it, right? And if it does get too busy, we can always sink this down, which we might do eventually once we pop 25 tiles because all this space will open up. So I imagine the rail infrastructure will probably change with that, but that's future Egg's problem at least. Right, so cool. We now have our sort of main road coming up the area. So let's go ahead and get this established. Now, of course, we've done this many times before, especially during the ore industry build, or oil industry build. We used the addition of a toll booth to serve as something of a security gate entrance, right? You know, power plants are relatively secure places to go to. It's not a place you can just sort of wander into off the street. So we can bring those vibes into cities. Everyone's going to have a nice time with that, I think. So we're going to draw in a dirt road frame. And then we want to snap to this really. And I was going to draw this right the way through the middle of the complex, and then I know that all the roads here are going to be snapped to the angle that is sort of parallel at this point, right? So hopefully that sort of works out. I guess we'll see how the build develops. Cool. So now we can connect this in, so we know we're going to connect about there. So again, why don't we bring off that road first? Okay, and then we can now allow this connection to establish how things are going to sit. I think we might actually go for a two-way large. And that's totally inappropriate, is it? Go for that. Go for a curve road 2 with our road guideline. Just re-establish that connection. And there we go. We can delete this now. Then we know that everyone's parallel to this main industrial road. So get this extended. Make sure we're not sort of dipping off a terrain layer here, because I don't really want lots of dipping down within the power plant. Cool. So we've got a baseline established. Nice little entrance coming in. However, I'd like to actually do some more work to the entranceway here. So we're going to come into our industry areas. Something we haven't tried before. We're going to paint out our oil industry area here. Draw it up. And then just a little. There is actually oil we could make use of here. So we could actually use some of the oil extraction assets and make it functional. Likewise, if you don't have oil in the particular place you're building, then ore would work as well. Okay, so there we go. This oil area is now extended. And as we've recently discovered in the Noobs Guide, that as the ore main buildings sort of move through their levels, they changed their appearance, and I think that the level 5 oil industry main building is a really nice entrance for a power plant. It's kind of got those more secure vibes on it, a little bit of car parking and detailing out front. So I'm actually going to relocate the main building for the oil area into the power plant today. Okay, now again, orientation is important. I do think I like the security checkpoint sort of sat here, if you like. You know, you sort of drive into it. I think I'm going to be happy with that. So I might move it up just a touch more. There we go. Now I would like to do some car parking here as well. Of course, there's many different choices of car parking. Now you can get ploppable workshop ones. You can do the green cities trick. But again, you will remember many episodes again in the Noobs guide. We did a trick over here. Yes, here we go. With the 6-lane roads. This is a classic imperator design if you don't know where this comes from. Yeah, using sort of parallel 6 lanes. And we said, you know, from the right angle, during the right time of day, when there's a full moon after the first rains in April, it does look like car parking. So it's a vanilla solution, but there's others out there if you have them available to you. So that's what I want to go for. I'm going to go for a little bit of parallel 6-lane car parking action. And then I'm going to bring this out on a little road just next door to our sort of main building here. And I want to start sloping up a little bit, so I'm going to grab the height where we want this to sit. And then so I'll delete this for a second. So we'll have it almost on like a little tier, which will give us quite a nice sort of a look down from the ground as well, I think. And then we'll grab the level terrain. And I want to make sure that this bottom layer is the same height. There we go. Cool. And then we can draw in those 6 lanes now. So we can maybe do stretches of 20. Then how about we save 2 tiles in between, maybe even 3. Because that would give us some slightly nicer detail and opportunities. Okay, I think we can go for that. Let me bring that up. Connect this in. Let's make sure it's all level with guidelines and whatnot, and everyone's snapped in, and then everyone's happy. And then we can do some detailing palettes here if we like. Of course, you can actually, you know, put the 6-lane road with trees on if you want, but it's a little bit too fancy for what I'm after. So I'm thinking maybe just a regular line of live oaks between each layer, which will help reinforce a little bit of car parking vibes for us, whilst also respecting the tier of the build, especially from, you know, down on the main street here. It's fairly rudimentary vanilla car parking, but it's there if you want it. But, you know, use whatever solution you want. And Noob Yolk has died of power. Is that because we've cut the ore area off? Yes, it has. It has because of that. So, okay, let's get this fixed up anyway. So let's start having a little chat about assets now. There's many possibilities you can take a power plant in. Your unique buildings, if you have access to the high-tech content creator pack, a lot of these assets work very nicely with a nuclear theme. Research Center definitely, and the Nanotechnology Center too. But also other industry assets are also really more than welcome. So let's head over to another industrial area now. And I'd actually like to steal the Muddy Da Vinci ore mines area. So, of course, I'm just going to bring it out, sketch out a little space for it. Of course, you can sever that connection now. Okay, it's a really nice way of integrating some sort of different, you know, style themes into a build, using the ore or the general industry area assets like this. Right, and then let's just paint that around. So that's our oil area. And then this one over here, we can have as a little bit of ore, because we're going to be placing some of the rotary kiln plants, which is not something that we placed in the actual ore mine itself because they're quite big, but we can definitely get away with them here. And also some of the ore storage as well, which is like a classic sort of nuclear reactor sort of dome that we can get involved with. So rather than just the assets being immediately on the main road, what I would like to do again is give them a sense of perimeter and try to create a sense of facility, which is something that we've looked at before as well. So we're going to come in with some pathways, and then let's decide ourselves a detailing palette. We're going to spam down some generic vanilla overgrowth. Okay, super thick, super overgrown. And we'll have this come out by 180, then 120 every time. And then we can use this as a little bit of perimeter. So we'll do 180, then bring it down. And again, lots more overgrowth. And then little stretches and delicate nuances of oil industry fence are going to be really welcome here for, again, just creating a little sense of security. Okay, you know, there's radioactive materials on site here. It's not open to the public, is the sense you really want to create. Okay, so cool. There's a little bit of a border between primary road network and where you know your assets are eventually going to sit. Then we can maybe bring in this sort of main frame now, where we can start to play with some of the cool assets. Power production, of course, is the goal for today, so we want to be making sure that we're producing lots and lots of it, for which the nuclear plants will do. These are the highest producing in the game at 640, I think, right? I don't think anything's more powerful than this. Maybe the hydroelectric dam if you can place it right, but otherwise nuclear is the way to go. So, again, orientation is everything. Am I happy from most views around this to have the cooling towers at this orientation? I don't think it's a particularly bad aesthetic there, is it? It's going to sit mostly nicely with our skyline, I think. Yeah, I think I can get on board with that. It's not going to be too horrendous, is it? So now returning to the idea of including those industry assets. The ore stuff is kind of perfect for it. It's very industrial looking. Not everything, of course, you wouldn't have the excavator drills here. But things like the raw mineral storage, again, things that we've done in Palaven way back when, is going to allow us to add kind of a dome onto the side of the power plant, which is really cool, alright? Of course, if you have Move It, and you can fuse a lot of these buildings together, which looks really cool. So factor that in as well if you like. Okay, so let's now draw in a road that can hold this so it positions the dome to really sit against the back of the nuclear plant itself. Okay, again, it blends in, doesn't it? You know, it's serving as an industry storage area, which is actually going to store ore for us, which will be, of course, imported and mined out of the ground. So why don't we see if we can process that ore, maybe perhaps with the rotary kiln plant, which is an absolute behemoth of an asset. And again, it looks quite power production-y, doesn't it? For lack of a better phrase. Okay, again, just analyze how it sits in the build. If you're not happy with it, or you just don't like it, you think it's maybe too coal looking to be sat next to a nuclear plant like that, then change it out for something that you do like. But I'm pretty much on board with that, I think. But again, as always, asset orientation is king. So, we're going to see if we can finagle this into a slightly more different space. I think I'd also like a large warehouse over here too. Now the question is, can we squeeze in large warehouse and rotary kiln next to each other? It's off by a tile. One tile. Oh my word. Yes, right, okay. We're going to have to amend that. Let's just move everything over and then we can have these together. Okay, so there we have it. I couldn't not have that aligned, right? It nearly fit, but it didn't sit, but we forced it in. Okay, so now we'll place in the rotary kiln, which I'm a huge fan of. We love this one. All industry assets pair very well with power plants. So this is going to be producing metals, in which case we might as well store the metals locally. Okay, and then, again, there's possibilities for more factories around here if you like. You know, factory in what actually needs metals, like the car factory perhaps. A clothing factory also wants it, as does the modular house factory. So you could definitely have this nearby as well if you wanted to. You know, to sort of reinforce those sort of chunky, more industrial vibes. It's definitely not out of the question. You can maybe have this one over here for us. Maybe over this side as well. Yeah, we'll bear those sorts of things in mind. So let's just move a little bit of our forest here just so we can see exactly what landscape that we're going to be playing with. And then we'll extend these industrial road frames now to hold some new assets. Wonderful. So we can draw up here and see that we're basically a distance of 480 here. So if we go from this point to 480, that should allow us to fit it in now. We're actually a tile ever so slightly wider, but I'm fine with that. Again, like we've discussed before, having pathways running through facilities, especially that we did in our oil refinery in Ilos, can really help create, you know, a sense of scale and facility. Especially when we've got our workers walking in and amongst all this sort of stuff now, right? Really makes a difference. So much better than just throwing these power producing assets down and then just letting them add to the power pool for the city. We also get some car parking in this asset too, which is really helpful. I also think in terms of repeatable patterns, I would like to go ahead and possibly double up the pattern that's coming with power plant. So we could alternate this if we wanted to. The storage unit is a tile deeper than the power plant is. But don't think we should have any issues getting them back to back. Yeah, we could stagger them here. I think that might result in quite a cool pattern, so I think we'll try that. Why don't we go for there? And then again, we'll have the power plant on this side. So again, even now we're starting to lay these assets together, and it's just looking more official, isn't it? You know, just take that as a spy sample for the episode. It's only 3 assets placed on a road frame, but, you know, factoring in their positionings and orientations, as always, is going to help bring your build to life a little bit more. Tremendous. Go ahead and throw this one a little bit longer, and then we'll cut it alongside the plant. There we go. And then our second ore storage should fit in here now as well. There we go. These don't actually need the industry area. It's only here for the kiln plants. Okay. Then we can trim off any frames, and then obviously re-terraform as well as and where we need to. I'd also like to bring back that very thick pine forest, just so we can see what it's going to look like once it's totally surrounded by it, to make sure we're still happy with everything. What's going on? This wants to be re-terraformed now as well. It's a little bit too steep. Looks too terraformed, if you know what I mean. Okay, but there we go. The addition of cooling towers now, smokestacks as well, kind of really hammers home the, you know, it's quite clear that that's a nuclear power plant up on the hill there, isn't it? You imagine they wouldn't build nuclear power plants on a hill? I'm not entirely sure. Imagine if there was something of a meltdown. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, does it? If there's a meltdown, it's going to spread either way. I guess its elevation doesn't really matter for that much. I don't know. I'm not a nuclear physicist. I have no idea. Who knows? It is indeed lost knowledge. Okay, so yes, you guys will eventually get ore delivered, and it will also be stored here as well for them to continually process, which is also going to help with our money. We can, you know, import and export those products as well. Okay, but I'm a huge lover of the oil industry main building as an entrance to a power plant. It was very official, doesn't it? Huge fan of everyone. Huge fan of that one. Now, I do know that I am pumping an enormous amount of money into my daily power. Yes, we are. So if we bring this back down to 100%, how much power production do we actually lose? I know that I can lose my temporary power producing assets now until we got around to this build, like the nuclear plant in the oil refinery. And that should cut it down a little bit. We also need to get this hooked into the grid as well. So why don't we try and work on something of a transformer station, if you like. Okay, something that can maybe be fed out. And I think we can make quite a cool pattern out of this with the forest line, almost like there's been a very obvious point of deforestation. So again, another asset that works really nicely is the ore maintenance building. And this one will require the industry area, so you have to paint it out if you want to use it. But again, it's not a major issue, right? We still have it in here. So we'll go ahead and throw this down here. Okay, I'm just going to want to be terraformed a little bit, of course. Of course, we'll also trim up any of those awkward forest boundaries. We'll just redraw it when we know what we're looking like. We'll also terraform that as well. We will go ahead and grab the top layer and then just tell that we want to slope up from here. And I think what I do want to do is actually bring around a dirt road first of all, because I do want the grid snapping functionality here. So we'll have that in. Then I'm going to draw out a series of power lines that are indeed snapped into the grid. And then let's go for these ones here. Now I'm going to bring them up and over these road networks. Okay, it's going to give us some more layers of height. Also sort of brings a little bit more importance into the infrastructure as well. And then hook it into the actual national grid that's being fed out here. Again, we can maybe elevate it up a little bit so it's not quite so sort of steep and janky. And then maybe we have that pattern repeat again over on this side of tile apart. Bring it to a road guideline if it helps. And then again back into the national grid where we need it to. And then just by repeating this design in a couple of different places, as we come out the back of this building, we can create what essentially would be like a sort of make-do mock vanilla transformer. You get the impression of all the power lines leaving kind of a big blocky building like this. And again, down from our sort of smaller networks, down from where the Sims and the citizens would see it, you know, it's quite clear as to what you're approaching here. It's clearly a power station. Lots of very high voltage lines exporting the power from the facility into the national grid, where of course it's transformed and then, you know, fed into people's Kenwood blenders. Cool. So we got on board with that. Once we have those initial frames in, we can delete the dirt road and then just come onto a angle snap with the power lines and then allow them to sit as close as possible into that building. Of course, if you have Anarchy or indeed again move it, you can drag them so they're essentially fused into the building, which makes them look a little bit more official. But as a sort of general spice sample, you get the idea, hopefully, okay? I think it's pretty nice. I'm going to be generally on board with that, I think. So we're slowly coming together here, I think, right? Everything's happy, everyone's getting to know each other. Spices are cooking. Okay, people are mingling. So I'm going to do an extreme harsh terraform line here. I might even also end up tunneling at this train line here for a little while. But I wanted to see if we can respect the modular house factory as part of this build as well. Very much in the vibe that we have done, you know, you can use these as decoration points. These large industry DLC factories. They're a ton of fun to use. So let's start back into industries. We want to come into it and then we can... Looks like we can just about get it in here, but of course we need to see how this looks. I do like it, it has to be said. I don't hate it. Positioning is very important though. It could possibly be too big for the area. Could get away with the toy factory here, but it's got the massive duck outside it, hasn't it? No, not at all. We can't have that one here. Nope. The car factory is enormous, not a chance we're getting this in here. However, the clothing factory is making itself known as a possible contender. It's quite a modern looking building. And I think it can definitely be blended in with the overall sort of heavy industrial service area theme that we're playing within a power plant like this. Okay, it's not too bad. I'm relatively happy with it. It does however want crops and animal products and plastic, all of which will be produced by our industrial areas, so it shouldn't be too long before it gets to the delivery. We might just want to help it out with some storage, maybe with another medium warehouse, which is one tile away from fitting in. No, so close. Okay, we'll find a place to finagle this in, perhaps maybe along the back side of it. Okay, it would be really nice if it would have fitted in there. One tile away. It's always one tile, isn't it? Okay, so he's being fed with ore now. Yes, there we go. So of course we will get a big rush of industrial traffic. Yeah, you'll see it piling up here. This is just expected because we've placed down 2 storage buildings. Everyone's going to come and try and stockpile these up. It will fade away eventually. Don't worry about that once you place them down. If you are, of course, taking inspiration from the build today. Okay, but I think actually in hindsight, what I do want to happen is to actually have the factory almost finagled into the side of the warehouse as though it's an extension of it. So I'm going to be happy with that, I think. Let's go ahead and... Actually, that kind of looks like it's already perfectly orientated in terms of its zoning tiles this side. So we can grab the unique factory again. There we go. Yeah, perfectly measured. So we can see there, okay, positioning the clothing factory right next to a large warehouse. It almost extends the asset, doesn't it? No, unless you're right on this axis line, you can see that they're separated. But, you know, from the wider view, we've now created some really large industrial buildings that, you know, might be used for storing the nuclear fuel or perhaps the waste that comes from, you know, that particular type of production. You can pretend and be creative, right? So I think that's where a lot of the fun lies in vanilla for me. Being a creative little egg. And then we'll have that there. And again, why don't we remember some of the vibes that we're trying to bring home in terms of things like a pathway through the middle. Again, once Sims are sort of walking in, helps create a little bit more sense of facility, especially when you see people moving between these spaces here as well. Not that this will be a vastly walkable path network anyway, because it's industry, but you can pretend. Alright. Otherwise, I'm fairly happy with this. It's really coming together. It's a slow case study, if you will, in asset positionings and orientations. Can take a while to get there, but I think we're certainly on our way. However, guys, that does feel like a good place for a detailed time-lapse. Not too much to do today, quite a short video compared to some on the channel. Apologies if longer uploads annoy you. Realise that I have been kind of uploading 50 plus to sometimes over an hour videos for quite a long time now, so hopefully it's not too irritating to watch, but yeah, a little bit of a shorter episode today. But yes, so let's come in and reinstate our pine forest boundary. Okay, we really want to maintain this sort of sense of scale. So we'll go ahead and get this in. Also want to add some fencing around these sort of export power lines and, you know, refine their shapes and sizes as they leave back into the national grid. Just so it looks a little bit more official, you know, sort of fenced off and safe and whatnot. I continue with lots of detailing around these sorts of spaces, you know, like we've talked about, creating some sort of overgrown perimeters around a facility like this. So happy with that. And also reintroduce some terraforming, perhaps some rocks along this sort of toll booth as well, almost like it is kind of a little fort, right? I think it fits really nicely with the Noob's Guide skyline. So if you kind of sat within the industrial suburbia here, you know, you can really tell what it is, right? Really cool to put together. I've never really done one on a hill before either, and it's really given it like a larger sense of importance, isn't it? You can see this from anywhere now, even if we had kind of, you know, further and deeper into Noob Yolk, you know, you can still make out the power plant over there. Really cool. Happy with it. It's nice. It's actually more dominant than the stadium, which we will get around to doing, of course. Yeah, but either way, let's detail up Noob Yolk's power plant, and then we'll be right back. back everyone, let's have a detailing review, shall we? So up the main road we brought in some very thick pine forest with some little layers of farm fencing as well, which turned out quite nice. Oil fencing on the side of the power plant. Then coming up to the toll booth we have some repeated rock patterns in the form of like a retaining wall just around the big two-way booth, so this is nice, kind of highlights the entrance a little bit more, it's quite cute. Classic car parking patterns in again using the imperator trick of repeated 6-lane roads. Again, from the right angle, right time of day. It's more from the sort of the larger aesthetic of the build, it kind of fits in car parking, but it's nice, it's alright, it's very vanilla. I'm tremendously happy with the way that the oil industry main building turned out as an entrance to the power plant. Really cool, never thought of doing this before, so yeah, happy with the way it came off. It's nice to have these sorts of props and assets in the foreground of a power plant, really helps with the build I think. Then lots of that overgrown fencing pattern as we come into the power plant itself. Switched out the T-junction for a roundabout. Then another little store yard that's stocking products for our unique factory of course. And then we've totally rounded out the power plant, power line design here. And a little bit of appreciation actually for the aesthetic of very heavily elevated vanilla power lines. It's not something you see very often. But I think in the right setting, it works, doesn't it? I think we've gotten away with it. We have something of a national grid looking power network now that kind of spills out of the power plant, which I'm really happy with. Turned out quite nice with this one. Continue to decorate the forest with more rock decals and overgrowth and the occasional taller boreal pine. So really happy with kind of the forest palette that's come out. Also included one of the emergency shelters from natural disasters. Trying to ignore the fact it is an emergency shelter, but you can imagine maybe this is some sort of underground access for the reactor buildings. Don't know, you can be creative, right? Then also broken the road here as well, and then replaced with a little bit of poor man's surface painter using the vanilla walking pathways. This just adds a nice little bit of texture into the road network and the kind of overall compound itself, right? I think it's quite nice. There's also more poor man's surface made to work behind all these fencing between the two buildings. And I think from wherever you look across the build now, you get a real sense of facility, if that makes sense. You know, you can see it looks like this larger sort of complex that every building is here to do something specific for the resource, like power in this case. And of course, if you want to give this thing more room to breathe, absolutely do. You know, leave more of these sort of overgrown, very heavily path networks between them. And then with the train that actually comes through this area, we've just tunneled it into the banked landmass. And then it follows out now, and we've done, again, more of those vanilla rock retaining walls with some more pine forest at the front. And the power plant just looks splendid from here now. It's sat in really nicely on top of that hill from wherever we look at it, it looks like a real industrial facility, so super happy with it, especially from sort of the wider views. It's settled in really nicely into Noob Yolk. And then the train does emerge out this side again, and because it's embanked, it looks like the tunnel doesn't sink down. You know what I mean? It looks like it's flat when you tunnel it into an embanked landmass, if that makes sense. It looks like it just goes into the landmass and then back out the other side of it again. So really cute, super happy with it, and then some future road network extensions. For what I think we're going to do as a rural fishing town alongside this side of the lake. That was kind of the general consensus of what we should do with this water. So incoming rural fishing town build at some point to sit at the foreground of the power plant here. And then touches of commercial in and around the train station. Just start creating a little bit of buzz and activity around this part of the map now. Start getting some people up and down these new frames that we've been drawing out the last few episodes. Otherwise guys, that is going to do it for today. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, likes, comments and shares below really do help me out. Equally as much if you haven't enjoyed it, then please feel free to leave me a dislike as well. Quite a cute, quaint build today. Really simple vanilla tactics of asset orientation and, you know, how assets sit within a tile spacing of each other so a pathway can come in. Just adds, you know, that sense of facility. I feel like I've said that 1,000 times this episode, but that's what it is. I hope you can certainly take some inspiration from this. You know, you can go larger. You can take it into water treatment as well if you want, you know, spam your water treatment assets down so you know, have enough for your entire city's coverage, and then, you know, that's your main sewage treatment plant. These utility service areas are really fun to piece together. And I'm very happy with how the Noobs Guide's Noob Yolk power plant has settled in too, so really enjoyed it. Please do hang around for some cinematics and check how this build sits into the rest of Noob Yolk. Otherwise I will shut up and I will leave it there. Let's thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.